देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्. I request the Honorable Niyam sir to start his address, and request the host, Honorable host, to take over from him.
Sir, before starting, we must tell you about this advocate campaign group. This advocate campaign group is a group of advocates who are thinking about public service on the one hand, public free legal aid and legal service. Apart from this, they also trying to explore horizons to impart the education and legal updates to their colleagues. The law faculties are also helping us. Apart from students, paralegal staff, they are all working in the interest of nation, in the interest of general public. So with these brief description about advocates campaign group, and we also took this place at Haridwar in Shantikunj. That is the headquarter of All World Gayatri Parivar. That apart from our professional service, we will do something for nation, something for public, and something for downtrodden class. So in these circumstances, there are also some instances that some of our members, like Mr. C.L. Verma, he started this meeting by chanting Gayatri Mantra. He is a very good person, very humble person, and very honest person. He is in advocacy, but he adopted very high ideals in advocacy. And we have also with us Sri Harish Kumar Sharma ji, and he has done a lot of work in public services, particularly the services of elder senior members of the society, and he is also a senior member of our profession. Sir, we are very much delighted and glad to have you with us today, that you are guiding us today, and you will speak on the subject religion and law that is chosen by you, and we welcome you, sir, with the applause. I request all of our members to welcome Sir Venkatramani. We have Sir Shailendra Kumar Gupta ji, is professor in Banaras Hindu University. This is one of the great universities in India. He will give a short description about you. Thereafter, we will request you to speak on the topic. May I request Dr. Shailendra ji to read out the. Sir Venkatramani ji need no introduction, but briefly we are saying so. Our learned professor, Dr. Shailendra ji, please.
Honorable distinguished learned speaker, Shri R. Venkatramani ji, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, Honorable distinguished members of the organizing committee of this program, and my dear friends. It is indeed my privilege and honor to say few words in the honor of a distinguished advocate of the Supreme Court of India. Shri R. Venkatramani ji completed 40 years of practice in Supreme Court with practice in various branches of law, prominently constitutional law, law of indirect taxes, human rights law, civil law, criminal law, consumer law, corporate law, environmental law, and law relating to services, etc. He has represented several state governments, central governments, universities, public sector undertakings in their major litigations in Supreme Court and High Courts. Shri R. Venkatamani ji has served as the member of the Law Commission of India for 2 terms in 2010 and 2013. He served as member in several commissions and committees and has reputed law publications to his credit. He has been the guest faculty in various premier law schools and resource person for the Bar Council of India and National Judicial Academy Bhopal, which conducts continuing legal education programs for judges. The Honorable Speaker of today, Shri Venkatamani ji, spoke at the workshop organized by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights and International Commission of Jurists and associated with the International Working Group engaged in drafting an instrument on the right to food following an international conference held at Berlin in May 2002 and also involved in the Nepal experience sharing exercise in 2008. Apart from that, has been considered an academic advocate, and he has a high reputation in legal academia also, and therefore Honorable Supreme Court has utilized his services as amicus curiae, as a friend of the court in various PIL matters, and therefore it is indeed a matter of great privilege and honor for all of us that he is amongst us, and we are going to be benefited from his lecture. The topic of today's lecture is a theme relating to religion or the concept of dharma and Indian system. A friend, our constitution has used the word secularism, and right to religion has been recognized as a fundamental right in part 3rd of the constitution. But it has been a matter of great debate. What is the nature of right to dharma or right to religion under the constitution? What is the true meaning of secularism? Is it the strict wall theory that is prevalent in Western philosophy, or it is Sarva Dharma Sambhav? So today, a academic lawyer and constitutional expert is talk on a very relevant topic of contemporary time. So with these few words, I think that it is again a matter of great privilege for us that such a distinguished legal luminary is amongst us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for your kind words and for the organizers. When I was approached to address a gathering like this, the first and foremost question was, what should I talk about? Ever since all of us have been locked down owing to COVID, we have several issues of current concerns which are gripping us. Many of us, both as lawyers and in public, are involved in understanding how to resolve current issues. So there are several subjects one can talk about in the field of economics, in the field of human rights, in the field of commercial law, or any of those current contemporary issues of great concern. And but why did I choose to talk about religion and law? It's been quite some time since I have been involved in understanding the dimensions of religion and the entanglement of law with religion. The reasons which probably prompted me or persuaded me, apart from being deeply personal, are also matters of social concern. And when I chose this subject, I know I was entering a virtual ocean, and to sail across this deep subject and to catch some of those essential elements within a span of 1 hour would be a challenging task. But I did not want to talk about religion in general or religion and law in general. But let me say what I have in mind while I'll be engaging with attention. First is the proposition that if Sanatana Dharma is famed because of its great inclusiveness of all faiths and varieties of faiths and understanding, but notwithstanding its great inclusiveness, religion in India today is under great stress and strain. The diversities of faith and the demand for equality of treatment on the one hand, and the very intricate challenges involved in dealing with these two demands are by themselves a very absorbing subject of study. The second aspect I wanted to deal with is the increasing tendency among all governments to take over the control of particularly Hindu religious institutions and temples. And alongside, we also see a campaign which is generated by persons who claim to be persuaded by public concerns, social reforms, etc., to virtually challenge the deepest layers of not only Hindu Sanatana Dharma, but also other religions as well. Therefore, we have on the one hand a headlong conflict between religion and its practice as we all understand, and challenges to the very existence of the foundations of some of the religious ideas and practices. So where does the Constitution come in the context of both of these issues. I thought, in view of the fact that the tensions surrounding both these issues are becoming more and more vocal, and the increased stance taken by people belonging to different religions on either minor or major issues are matters of concern. So that's why I thought, let us start debating some of these issues from a very objective, if possible, neutral, and if also possible, looking at what can be done from inside. I think religion is, as a subject, is as vast as its appeal, and the controversies surrounding it, like the difficulties inherent in the task of definitions. Generally, as a student of law or a lawyer, all of us know that all definitions have certain difficulties, and some definitions have any amount of vagueness and arbitrariness. Therefore, like the definitions inherent in, like the difficulties inherent in definitions, defining religion is challenging. I don't propose to do that here. But no belief, howsoever primitive, as we call them, or rudimentary, can be reduced to mere fantasies or imaginations. When we claim Hindu religion is Sanatana Dharma, we do so not in any partisan conceptions, but an endorsement of accumulated wisdom of ages. Similarly, the claim of other faiths regarding profound values for human beings cannot be rejected on grounds of reason. Now, religions are faulted for having generated conflict and hostilities. Intolerance in history is said to be due to religious and more than other reasons. Religions are called fields of blood. Several centuries of clashes between Christianity and Islam in Europe, like the War of Crusades. The anti-Semitic barbarities in Europe, both before and after Second World War, seem to suggest that the nobler and the holy part of religions have either been lost or reduced to a corner, particularly in public field. Studies of political violence in India among its kingdoms and religious strife also suggest India was also not free from human engagement in violence to settle religious differences, even though they may not have been as huge as it happened in Europe. There's also a growing body of opinion, mostly in the field of sciences, that religion should be subjected to scientific scrutiny and religions must be put on the dissection table. There is yet another concern, that is diversity of faiths and plurality of beliefs, both within religions and in every country, except totalitarian countries like communist China or theocracies such as Islamic countries. No country in the world today is a closed society or aligned to only one faith. Diversities demand equal treatment. Diversities generate strong secularism dialogues. Secularism then begins to beget inter-religious conflicts, or it encourages non-believers are agnostics to pointedly challenge a particular faith alone, that seems to be happening in our country for some period of time, and Hinduism has been at the receiving end. Serious or sectarian or crude challenges to Hinduism, for example, have always secular overtones. Colonial rule led to historical distortions of Indian history. Its religion and the hoary past with spiritual quest and knowledge. Who else than Sri Aurobindo could have talked about it when he described the Vedas as more symbolic than the rhetoric involved in it? A natural backlash because of the secularism language has been attempts to justify, to explain, to restate, and to reiterate the greatness of Hindu thought and way of life. This is bound to happen. And it can happen at the intellectual level, at the level of demonstration of practice of religions, and the elevating dimensions of Hindu religion by its saints, its seekers, and also at the level, more importantly, which is why it is more worrisome, and also at the level of challenging conversions by other faiths and parasitic propagations by them. This is happening notwithstanding the Madhya Pradesh or the Himachal Pradesh governments having enacted anti-conversion legislations. This is where live wires of clashes between faiths, may get laid. We see it very clearly today. We cannot close our eyes to the fringe areas of Hindu faith where militancy is whipped up and provocative speeches are made without considering the damage to Hindu faith itself. Today morning, one of my lawyer colleagues was in a television show in relation to what's happening in Mumbai, and a very unfortunate case of somebody's suicide, and the whole world is making a story out of it. So in the television show, one of the, I think, a party member belonged to a particular political party asked this young lawyer, when he said there must be an end to this intrusion into incidents and being blown out of proportion. So this politician asked him, are you the final guardian of Article 21 of the Constitution? So what I'm trying to point out is, if militancy is whipped up and provocative speeches are made without considering the damage to Hindu faith itself, we have a problem. The nobler and the profound elements of Hindu faith thus get lost. Any small issue in some remote part of a country is getting projected by the media as a reflection of national feelings or perspectives, with which I think all of us will disagree. We also see that both social media as well as visual media claim absolute freedom and demand no censorial restrictions on their content, as well as range of matters are even picked up for discussions. It is generally portrayed that Islam is at the receiving end because of Hindu phobia. We have the recent example of Sudarshan TV live before us. Every constitution promises religious freedom. The Indian constitution is no exception. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights calls upon member nations to ensure freedom of conscience and faith and equal treatment of all faiths. At the European Union level, the European Convention guarantees the equality of all faiths. The unprecedented migration of people all over the globe and has converted several countries into multi-faith communities. The religious debate in the religious establishment debate in US has also turned new chapters, moving away from mere special protections for religions from governmental control or interventions. It has now moved more towards equal treatment for religions and non-religions alike. So the equality debate in USA, which has picked up after a famous case in the mid-80s, the debate has therefore exposed religion's special claims and undermined its importance. That's one of the biggest challenges which religions will continue to face. The undermining of its importance in organizing and contributing to the well-being of both individuals and collectives or groups in the community. If that gets undermined, and every aspect of religion, for good or bad reasons, gets entangled with law and is thought to be controlled and monitored through law, we have a serious problem. This undermining of religious, the efficacy of religion and the essential necessity of a religion is therefore in contemporary times, because of its increasing entanglement with law, is in great peril. Religions have thrived because of the internal organic strength of religions, regardless of the scriptures of each religion. People who followed a particular faith and the great appeal in the search for truth, universal truths, and the inner yearning to look at peace for oneself, comfort and contentment in following religion, and very often the joys and ecstasies one derives in the practice of religion. Every religion can probably take pride in giving examples of people by whatever name you call them, saints, mystics, Sufis, or whatever name you may call them. The grand experience of such people which have contributed to the elegance and the beauty of religion. All this need to be nurtured and cherished and protected. So we ask a question as to whether more and more we win to equal treatment of religion, more and more we get entangled with law. Where are we, going ahead? So the traditional persuasions for importance of religion and a special place for it in individual life and collectives are sought to be weakened or debilitated. Einstein's following statement is quoted by both camps, namely the religious camp as well as the non-religious camp. I quote, this is what Einstein said. To know what is impenetrable to us really exists, manifesting itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, with our dull faculties can comprehend only in their most primitive forms. This knowledge, this feeling, is at the center of true religiousness. In this sense, and in this only, I belong to the ranks of devotedly religious man. I think pick up any one of a long series of saints in our country who wrote on their religious experiences, whether it is Kabir or Ravidas or even those saints in Maharashtra. You get that their statements about their experiences are not less profound than what Einstein has said. So therefore, for each one of us, our faith is sacred and life nurturing. A faith is not merely a collection of scriptures, It is a continuing stream of sacred and profound experiences of peoples, devotional practices carried through generations. For instance, the great Bhakti movement in our country, permeating almost every nook and corner of the country. And what James Madison says before the Constitution of USA was adopted, I quote, "It is the duty of every man to render to the Creator such homage and such only as he believes to be acceptable to him. This duty, according to Madison, this duty is precedent both in order of time and in degree of obligation to the claims of civil society." So for a person who has the conviction of a particular faith, the degree of obligation to the Creator is of prime importance than, let's say, a social contract. And that is the reason why I think constitutions have talked about liberty and the freedom of religion. Because if on the basis of a social contract, and any one of the reasons relating to social contract, namely public order, etc., if state or governments can imperil religious freedom and liberty. One may also notice that the Indian Constitution, like several other constitutions, also talk of not only the freedom of faith and conscience, but of even denominations or sects or groups of people to hold holy their faiths and beliefs and practices of religion. And why is it so? The reason seems to be so obvious, but sometimes these reasons get clouded due to historical events and circumstances. For the importance of a right to religion can be said to be of equal relevance or a higher relevance compared to other fundamental freedoms. In some debate in the Constitution and also Supreme Court, it has been stated that there is no preferred freedoms in our, in the constitutional framework, following what US Supreme Court said in an entirely different context. Can we say that among the fundamental freedoms in Chapter 3 of the Constitution of India, some freedoms stand above all? Or can we say that some freedoms, such as the right to freedom of conscience, faith, liberty, and religion, ought not to be easily and lightly subjected to judicial scrutiny or governmental control? And there ought to be reasons which are so important for a community existence itself. I think nothing short of that can supply a reason for governmental control of religion, faith, religious institutions, etc. But today, the legitimacy for governmental control of religious institutions have been so lightened, and the rationale for a governmental intervention in religion, both on the ground that it need to maintain a diversity of faiths in the country, and also that in the absence of governmental intervention, there is a great failure of administration of religious institutions. We need to tackle both these strands very carefully and closely. The second part of it, that accountability of those in charge of religious institutions because of certain fundamental weaknesses of human nature, such as corruption, etc., has been often touted. It is nothing new post-constitutionally. During the British colonial empire, you go back to year 1796 onwards. The famous temple in Kanchipuram was taken over in the year 1796. But then at that point of time, between the East India Company and the colonial empire, the lines between religion and their governance were not very clearly drawn. It is amusing to say that, for instance, in Fort St. George in Chennai, when the national flag, the prayers were said during Pongal and also Ramzan. And important functionaries of the East India Company took part in religious festivals. One can describe them not as a mere less intrusive and more as participative. But then the seeds were slowly laid for greater governmental intervention. Somewhere in 1863, the British government thought that we must let loose of all the control we had taken over Hindu religious institutions. By 1863, the tallies say about 7,600 Hindu temples became under the control of colonial administration. And today, if you take a state like state of Tamil Nadu, let's say there are about 35,000 temples, big, small, medium, call what you may. All of them are under the control of the government under what is touted as the Hindu Religious Establishment Law. I'll briefly now, a little later, talk about what's happened in Uttarakhand very recently. And therefore, what is important is how wonderful, my thoughts run like this. How wonderful if it can be if religion and faith can live without legal limitations. Law, after all, is lesser than religion. Law is always the attempt to treat human conduct as a suspect. Law deals with human beings in their less ethical or diminished moral states of conduct. Law inclines to catch the fallen states of human behavior. I think, therefore, law cannot create spiritual values. Law can only command to adhere to common standards of conduct. The governments, by reason of the second part of this law, are now getting emboldened to intervene without relevance and justness in virtually every aspect of religion, faith, and very often courts are drawn into controversial issues, and courts are now beginning to develop new doctrines and principles to sustain a challenge to deeply held beliefs and faiths and practices. So you cannot find an answer to it through law. But law will necessarily hang around our necks. You cannot avoid it. Because the Constitution says that in certain circumstances, law can come in and regulate the affairs or the of activities of religion. If you read Articles 25 and 26 very closely, and look at what our Supreme Court has said right from Shirur Math case in 1954, the seeds of greater entanglement of law and government and religion were laid at that point of time. I think social reforms agendas have demanded complete dismantling of religious structures. The professor mentioned about the wall of separation. The wall of separation expression exists in USA. And this wall of separation, if any, between government and religious institutions in India have disappeared. Government control of temples is considered to be compatible with the Constitution. The recent, I mentioned about it, the recent example of Char Dham law in Uttarakhand, upheld by the High Court, connotes that governments can have legitimate reason, any legitimate reason, to administer temples and religious institutions. The Char Dham law says for reason of rejuvenation of the four temples which are called Char Dham, there can be a complete substitution of the trustees of these temples, or persons in administration of these temples, by a pure and simple bureaucratic civil service machinery. Therefore, today, government is in control of temples without there being any apology for doing so. The question is, Articles 25 and 26 are being slowly rewritten legislatively and judicially. I began my concerns expressing that unlike many countries which have become diversity and plurality by reason of contemporary global migrations, India has been a great country of diversity for centuries. The diversities are in many forms, not only in relation to religion and faith, diversities in language, in culture, and notwithstanding a continuing tensions and struggles between different languages over long periods of time. The way faiths, beliefs, practices, and the way our Puranas and Itihasas and the stories of which are told and retold through them, which have become part of our household, understanding and household practice. The way it has happened through the length and breadth of the country is something amazing, which has not happened, for instance, in Europe. It will be a long story to understand the struggles between Islam and Christianity, right from the collapse of the Roman Empire, and even before Roman Empire became a Christian empire under Emperor Constantine. So, and much later, both religions fought for hegemony, and in the process, the religions not only, I think, sacrifice human lives in innumerable numbers, but the very legitimacy of faiths to become inclusive faiths were always under continual challenge. While on the one hand, people who read both Christianity and Islam and their holy books say that these religions have always been inclusive, but over a period of time, by reason of any reading of the scriptures, whether the Holy Bible or the Holy Quran, by any reading of the scriptures, if the inclusiveness has been lost and they become exclusive faiths, and they also brought in hostile elements, as far as other faiths are concerned. What I'm trying to say is that this did not happen in the Indian subcontinent. The plurality of faith, the diversity of understandings and practice in India were entirely owing to the fundamental philosophical traditions of Indian knowledge and system. So following the great Vedas, we had the Upanishads, which if you look at any one of them, are no less equal in terms of knowledge, depth of understanding, and profundity of statement of principles of life than compared to any other philosophy in the rest of the world. And therefore, for reasons such as plurality, the Sanatana Dharma traveled beyond Indian frontiers, not by reason of conquest of empires, but by reason of mere appeal to mind and the quest of minds to understand the world and to understand what is human life and what is its creation. The great questions which human beings have always asked, right from ever since Homo sapiens probably began to grapple with mysteries of life. Therefore, when you're talking about diversity as an issue today, notwithstanding the great acceptance and accommodation of plurality in India, there are some new reasons why diversity is under stress and strain. Sometimes I wonder whether the diversity, which could have been practiced without intrusions from one faith to another, has been subjected to a near collapse because of political reasons, because of political activity, or because sometimes one wonders whether the Constitution is also responsible for it. If the Constitution says every faith is equal, and then taking advantage of the equality of faith, if that has happened in our country by reason of saying reform the Hindu religion, reform all practices of Hindu faith, and once you enter into the field, what happens is the equality demand of other faiths and the great international campaigns to promote and propagate other faiths, whatever means one would like to do them. I'm not getting into that very controversial issues. So the diversity of faith could have been practiced in a more nobler, holier way. One is reminded of the edicts of Ashoka. And we had any number of examples in our country. But since either for reason of the constitutional practice or reasons which are political or reasons which are international, now this diversity, the holy way of practicing diversity, is under challenge. I would like to say something about what I understand as diversity before I go to the Chardham case and say what is foul as far as religious management of institutions by governments. I think diversity is a law of nature. Nature enjoys creation of diversity. The infinite forms and manifestations of life and the existence is nature's curriculum and syllabus for human understanding. Mystics and saints belonging to all possible faiths have had glimpses of the joy of diversity. I think Kabir mentioned about it. They've all told us how to celebrate diversities. Those lives have been lived and chronicles have been written at times, what I may call as colonization of human mind by fear, coercion, and authority has not taken place. The historical conditions and events which are related to the emergence of various faiths in the globe are in one sense the sacred part of humanity's history, because without them, profound human experiences commending and extolling paths of exploration to fundamental questions of existence would not have been available. If only cold reasons and mechanistic philosophy, whether of an atheistic variety or agnostic variety, had shut out all other forms of experiences, human life would have lost a wide range of treasures. I'll just give an example. Hungary, while it was part of the Soviet bloc, in its constitution declared itself as an atheist state. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, and Hungary became independent of the communist socialist blocs, in its new constitution, it has granted enormous freedom to church and church activities. And the Hungarian people's return to religion and faith is a very interesting example. So then, I want to have to share with you a very important dimension of what I thought to be shared. For instance, in Jewish mystical tradition, the deep layers of consciousness were called Avanta Deliba. That means the understanding of the heart. And those endowed with mystical inspirations were designated as what? They were called the descenders of the chariot. Lord Krishna was a great descender of the chariot. He himself was a chariot holder of a chariot. So the descenders of the chariot were those who understood the heart and were endowed with mystical inspirations. Now I think in times such as this, every one of us, I say, must become descenders of the chariot. And that our inquiry, practice, and transformation of social realities in hostility can be then handled differently. As I said, when each one of us resolve to become the descenders of the chariot. In a manner of speaking, religious coexistence can acquire new dimensions and ascend greater heights if only we are able to shed forever claims on behalf of each faith to be exclusive or superior. So one of the reasons I thought I've analyzed for a backlash from the Hindu Sanatana Dharma way of life is that for quite some time, it has been at the receiving end of tolerating, let's say, conversions. So at a period of time, conversions became a very contentious issue. And I remember Swami Dayananda Saraswati, in one of his great challenges to letters written to Vatican, said conversion is violence. I think he was right in saying that. So it is violence in the sense you are trying to read out a human mind from its state of repose in a particular faith, and then ridicule the faith, and then say, my faith is superior to you. I think once and for all, if only all faiths and religions can resolve at the highest level if possible. That conversion is the most unnecessary element of religious activity. I think a good deal of strife and hostility will go away. And this resolve must come as quickly as possible. I don't think, as Article 25 or 26, or any part of any human rights relating to religion, can raise propagation as equivalent to conversion. Any one of us who believe in a particular faith has the freedom to propagate a faith because I think there is some nobility in my faith, because I think there is something holiness in my conviction. So the nobility and the holiness of my conviction or faith alone can be reasons for sharing my holy, sacred, and very important experiences with the rest of the world. What Ramakrishna Paramahamsa did for the rest of the world was only sharing his mystical experiences, and not because he wanted to convert anybody by reason of an appeal of coercion, etc. So Sanatana Dharma did not ever have that necessity. But therefore, if once and for all, if all of us resolve, when I say all of us, people belonging to all faiths and religions resolve, that conversion is the most intrusive dimension of religious faith, and therefore it ought to be, kept away forever and ought to be suspended forever from our understanding of propagation of faiths. Then I think Articles 25 and 26 will begin to shine in a more radiant way. And that's one aspect of the dealing with diversities. Therefore, colonization of the mind in some point of time always accompanied geographical colonization. And today we no longer live in an area of geographical colonization. If there can be no geographical colonization, I think there should be no reason why we need to have mental colonization. Mental colonization is the most pernicious part of faith practice or faith propagation. I think that must come to an end. That's, if it comes to an end in nobler, holy ways, I think we would have probably dealt with diversity, tensions and challenges in an equally nobler and holy way. I was talking about Sri Aurobindo. Sri Aurobindo understood an important distinction between the sacred and the divine. Namely, he said, the idea of the sacred is historical, while the idea of the divine is something beyond historical and which is eternal and lies behind the universal features of all religions, and particularly aesthetic and religious experiences. Now, how do we actually promote the idea of the divine as the most central element of a religious practice, and the idea of the sacred as a part of past history? And because we are given a different meaning to sacredness, we are not able to come out of the conflicting claims of which sacredness is superior. Therefore, if no faith is superior than the other, and no sacredness of one faith is superior to the sacredness of another faith, let us not talk about superiority of sacredness of each faith. Let us talk about the divinity of each faith and the possibility and the potentiality of exploring, enhancing the divinity of each faith in a more accommodative environment. I don't propose to get into the questions of tolerance, intolerance, and all those discursive tendencies while talking about tolerance and intolerance. I think it was Thomas Paine who said way back in 18th century that both tolerance and intolerance are only two sides of the coin. When he said, I tolerate, then I stand at a higher level. When I say I intolerate, I deride you. So if I am a tolerant person, I mean, even though your faith or belief is inferior, but I still hold along with you. That is tolerance, which is a very wrong meaning of tolerance. So therefore, let's not get into this very semantic called textbook understanding of tolerance and intolerance. Our Sanatana Dharma has enormous potential to promote what divinity in each one of us will be the ultimate appeal to the divinity in each faith. I think that's the most important aspect we understood. Now, having said that, I have collected 3 stories which I narrated in an assembly about 4 to 5 years ago while talking of religious diversity. Let me narrate these stories and come back to temple control and governmental intrusions into religious institutions, and then keep this today's webinar open for discussions. There are 3 stories from different traditions. The first story is about the well-known, Nasruddin Khoja. It runs like this. One day, Nasruddin Khoja and a group of his neighbors were going somewhere together. They all rode upon their donkeys. When they came to a hill, Khoja noticed that his donkey was sweating. He got down from its back and whispered into its ear, "I'm sorry that you are working so hard that you are sweating." His neighbors noticed Khoja get down from his donkey's back and whisper into its ear, and they were curious about this. "Khoja, what did you whisper to your donkey?" one of them asked. He said, "I told my donkey that I was sorry that he had to work so hard that he sweated," answered Khoja. All his neighbors laughed, and one of them said, "Why did you do that? Donkeys do not understand human speech. They are not all humans." He said, "What I do is what concerns me. I did what is expected of a human being, and I do not care whether or not he understood what I said." Look at the beautiful philosophy behind the story. You do something not because somebody is in a position to understand that, or somebody may receive it well or not. When you do something good, like the story of the Good Samaritan in Bible, you do it because what you do is concerns you. And why you do it? Because it is nobler to do so. Therefore, in the context of religious diversities, what we do must concern us because it is nobler to do such things. There is a second story, a Sufi story. The story runs like this. Past the seeker on a prayer rug came the crippled and the beggar and the beaten. And seeing them, the Holy One went down into deep prayer and cried. He said, "Great God, how is it that a loving Creator can see such things and yet do nothing about them?" And out of a long silence, God said, I did something about them. I made you." Look at the story talking about the importance, even though human beings need not necessarily consider superior beings in the entire hierarchy of creation in the universe. But as far as this planet is concerned, we are so special in being able to understand, explain, and the meanings of the world and the universe, and in the process of such explanation of the world, being able to create a living condition for ourselves which other creatures may not be able to do. Therefore, an important special place which you occupy on this planet is so special and unique that we ought not to waste it away. And this story therefore talks about the special role which we can play, especially as human beings, and that we ought not to waste it away. A third story is about, let's say, something about stupidity. The story runs like this. A man was walking through the forest when he saw a fox that had lost its leg. The man wondered how the fox was able to stay alive. Then he saw a tiger come along with a game in its mouth. the tiger ate its fill and left the rest of the meat for the fox. The next day, God fed the same fox by the means the same tiger. The man wondered at God's greatness and said to himself, I too shall just take my rest like the fox with full trust that the Lord will provide me with all I need. He did this for many days, but nothing happened. And he was almost at death's door when he heard a voice say, Oh, you who were in the path of error, open your eyes to the truth. Follow the example of the life-giving tiger and stop imitating the disabled fox. The two things which are happening to our religious controversies. Either we ought to be life-giving tigers and ought not to be disabled foxes when we are not able to control the extremities of our religion and faith. This is what I call the disabilities which are imposed upon ourselves in the handling of our faith. For whatever reason disabilities have come upon us, I think it's an opportune moment in history, particularly in history, when we are in a position to understand challenges which are designated as constitutional challenges, challenges which come through a wide range of channels and sources, and challenges which are both seen and unseen. I think it's an opportune time for us to be able to, shed the disability role which we have adopted and becoming the life-giving tigers. When I say life-giving tigers, I don't intend to connote violence. I mean in a entirely different way. The life which is required to be given to our religious faith and practices. The life which is required to be given for them through law and through what called eliminating the ever-increasing intrusions of law. And this is what I call the life-giving elements of our role. So having said that, now let us look at briefly what is happening to the control of our religious institutions in the hands of law. We were referring to the Shirur Math case. I will not go into the details of that case, and we probably look at virtually every challenge to every law relating to administration of temples. We look at the history of the 1913 law relating to Badrinath temple during the British period. Then came the takeover of the Jagannath Puri temple. Then we have other cases relating to, for instance, even Islamic faith, the Ajmer Dargah case. In contemporary times after 1959, when Shirur Math case was decided, virtually every state governments have enacted laws relating to religious institutions and temple administration. There is not one state which has not enacted such a law. And it has therefore become something second nature to our thinking, that control of religious institutions by law and entry of government into religious institutions is something axiomatic. Judges, legislators, then public intellectuals, and people generally also tend to believe that governmental, intrusion or governmental control of religious institutions is not a bad idea after all. And why do we say so? Not because the Articles 25 and 26 properly read permit such interventions and intrusions, but because, like in every aspect of life, because of human deficiencies and human malfunctioning, we think the government is the best person to come in. Quite well we say individual human deficiencies in private lives is anathema to our spiritual pursuits, and therefore government can come in. We have not seen the dangers of governmental intrusions. Two dangers are there. One is the weakening of the faith itself. The ability of people to manage, notwithstanding human failures and deficiencies, the ability of people to manage our own institutions, particularly religious institutions. This ability is now under great challenge and is getting increasingly weakened. Because after all, if government can come in and do what they want to do, why the hell should I care about management of institutions according to nobler principles and precepts? I simply need to only follow what the government will say. Therefore, we are slowly shedding a very important part of our mental fabric in the practice of religion itself. The practice of religion is not merely sitting in our cozy comforts of our homes and engrossed in our prayers. If that is sufficient, then I think our the traditions of a religion will lose over a period of time the fields, the nurturing fields of the collectives by which experiences are transmitted, shared, and then enriched. Therefore, this weakening of our mind by reason of governmental intervention in management of religious institutions will have to be seriously taken note of. But on the other hand, as I said, judges, parliamentarians, and even at a very high level, people begin to think governmental intervention or control of religious institutions is for the good of humanity, is for the good of religion. I'm not very clear about that logic, even though, for instance, the recent instance of the Ayodhya temple and a great involvement of a central government in ensuring that the temple is built and the great heritage of Ramayana and Lord Ram is not lost forever to humanity and in future. So we probably will see stories being written sooner or later, and how on the one hand, if governmental association with religion and religious institutions can be tolerated for one good reason, why can't government association with a religious institution for another good reason cannot be tolerated? So which association is good and which association is bad? So from a Sanatana Dharma point of view, even when kings like Tipu Sultan said that governmental management of temples and its funds must be managed so cleanly, he was said to be following great traditions of a Hindu kings. So therefore, we see on the one hand, Sanatana Dharma doesn't see any difference between state, government, and faith. If that was all right, let's say in pre-constitutional times, if that was also in order when diversity was practiced with a great amount of understanding, perhaps that may not be in order in a post-constitutional and let us say in contemporary times when challenges between faiths, as I said, is no longer geographical colonization, but mental colonization. I think there is some element of restlessness in each faith. As I study religion, some element of restlessness in each faith that it must conquer the other faith. As long as the restlessness in each faith continues to occupy, or it is a preoccupation of the practice of that faith, then I think we have a danger. When you talk about the restlessness in each faith, we also see that it is not the majority of the people practicing such faith who are affected by such a restlessness. But there is always a core element of people who claim themselves to be the guardians of such faiths, who are afflicted by such restlessness. And such restlessness, according to me, I have not seen. I don't, even if somebody calls me that you are partisan or not neutral, I think I will have an answer. I have not seen such restlessness, for instance, in the Hindu faith. The restlessness in the Hindu faith is of an entirely different character. Its restlessness wanted to transcend human boundaries and to share the deep understandings it had gained from history and over a period of time with the rest of the world. And as we see beyond the Upanishadic period, and you also see, for instance, between the 13th to 18th centuries, when the Bhakti movement was at the height. We had a large number of writers whose names have been forgotten, large number of writers and thinkers who contributed to enriching the deep dimensions of Hindu thoughts and Hindu philosophy and understanding and knowledge. But because of what one may call the diminishing aspects of these, we are now encountering the clashes of faiths. And in that context, I asked myself a question as to whether the increasing engagement of governments in management of religious institutions, and more particularly Hindu religious institutions. Why do we ask this question? Because among the Hindu faith, one question is very often asked: why should governments engage themselves with Hindu religious institutions? Even though we have legislations relating to waqfs in the context of Islam, people say and complain, there are no law relating to management and administration of religious institutions of other faiths. I say that question is, while it's illogical and maybe even irrelevant, that question is bound to arise. Because on the one hand, we have an equality of treatment of all faiths. But on the other hand, equality seems to be vanishing. Therefore, this question will keep on animating Hindu faith, and sometimes it can have explosive connotations. I think we need to handle that question. And therefore, whether equality of faiths, equality between faiths will be fostered and generated and nurtured, not by reason of a law operating across all faiths, a law which will look into administration of faiths, not by such reason, but by law progressively, going away from and progressively vanishing from the control element of religious institutions. I think there must be a progressive vanishing element of law. And that's an important aspect for a debate. Is it possible to debate the progressive vanishing element of law in relation to administration of religious institutions? Why I wanted to raise these concerns, because the recent judgment of the Uttarakhand High Court in the Chardham case raises very profound questions. I'm sure this matter will land in Supreme Court. When the Sabarimala case was decided, the nation was agog with a lot of questions in many people's mind. Questions belonging to different peoples in different ways. And the Sabarimala case was reviewed, and thereafter the Supreme Court thought that there is an occasion for looking into these issues more fundamentally and deeply. Whichever faith you belong to, whether you are a believer or a non-believer, then if the fabric of our community will be strengthened, and what are the strengthening elements? I think even for a non-believer, if the fact that I'm a non-believer is important for me, I think the fact of a belief is equally important for a believer. So while a non-believer and agnostic can ridicule or bring to decimation or diminish the values of a faith or a religion on grounds of reason, I think while it is open for any person to do that because of freedom of conscience, but at the same time, there must be certain limits beyond which the right to practice one's conscience also will have to be looked at. So in contemporary times, we have the unlimited exposure at the hands of, let us say, rationalists or agnostics or non-believers. So if you want to think that if you have the right to control and transform all human mind into your way of life and your way of thinking, then I think there is a serious question there. And that is what is happening into several judicial dialogues and debates. If you look at what the Supreme Court did in the Sabarimala case, the court was primarily borrowing matters such as reason, rationality, appeal to matters beyond faith, and elements of equality, sometimes vaguely defined, and then claims between, either between faiths or between men and women of religion, sometimes very vaguely articulated or very excessively articulated. We have all of them there in the debate in Sabarimala. And that's bound to bound to be probably reflected in future judicial discourses and social debates. So we have at a crossroads in the religious history of our country, where the purely religious and spiritual aspects of our faith are increasingly under challenge and attack and exposure from a wider range of centers. And while that cannot be avoided, the only question is whether Constitution permits it, to what extent. And the most important question is whether, I want to digress here for a minute and say what happened in the history of US religious debate. So we had an issue such as abortion, closely linked with religious faith. And we had issues of denominations in USA, which could practice the denominational faith without governmental interventions. So from a US constitutional, debate, where social practices, social issues, such as abortion, got so entangled with a faith in a religion. And if we transform all of them into the Indian judicial discourse and dialogue, we have a serious, distortions entering into debates. And therefore, it's important for us to, as a community, and also as a community of lawyers and law teachers, that we need to open great chapters in our understanding, as I said, of diversity, on our understanding of accommodations between various faiths, and an appeal of management of diversities in more holier and nobler ways than the more baser ways of what is happening today. So, and then secondly, I think is important, increasingly important for me, that governmental engagement in religious affairs, and what ought to be the limits, and in what way such engagement will continue to, as I said, diminish and impair the ability, the ability of each human mind and the collective to manage our own faiths. And both of them are intertwined. The one doesn't, exist in isolation from the other. So I just want to conclude before we open to questions, that my own understanding of Articles 25 and 26 of the Constitution is that these provisions occupy a special position in the constitutional framework. While one may say the right to equality occupies an important position, while one may say the right to development as a human being, as a part of a community, is also equally important. But while all these claims operate at a certain social level, but as I quoted James Madison, the obligation to this universe, to this world, to the Creator, the obligation to get into a relationship with the Creator and this universe, that obligation is something of a very high order. And that obligation is a transcending element of our faith. So can that obligation be subjected to the scrutiny of law? And therefore, when Article 25 talks about the secular aspects of practice of religion being subjected to legal limitations or restrictions, I am sure the constitution makers did not have in mind a law being made so lightly and to be exclusively concerned only with religious institutions. The concept of the principle of law and a law to deal with secular activities under Article 25 can only mean any general set of laws relating to transaction of properties and administration of properties and secular aspects. And as Supreme Court also noticed, it's going to be very difficult to draw a line between what is secular and either what is an essential practice of a religion. Several people have spent an enormous amount of time and thoughts on this issue. But you cannot probably draw a line because, as far as the Sanatana Dharma is concerned, and if everything about it is the way of life, the way I think, the way I have my, let's say, the food, the way a food is cooked, the way food is offered to a neighbor, the way is food, and the way I dress, the way I practice certain aspects of religion, and the way I train my mind, and we give importance to brahmacharya. We give importance to celibacy, not celibacy in the way it has been understood, let's say, in the Christian tradition. The way we give importance to how we talk about purity of mind and body. If all this constitute higher levels of understanding and practice of faith, how can there be a law which can deal with any one of them and draw a line between what is secular and what is non-secular? Because I think, for a true practitioner of religion, there is nothing which is not which is secular. But at a very practical level, after all, we have to manage and administer our institutions, and we do it only through properties. Properties are the more of securities, we ought to be accountable. And therefore, to the extent, there is a very limited area of how we deal with properties, how we transact properties, and we administer properties in relation to institutions of religion. That need not be any exclusive law. A general set of legal principles which will regulate every human being's dealing with properties, I think would be sufficient. But the moment a law relating to administration of properties of religious institutions becomes exclusive to Hindu religious institutions, then we have a serious challenge. There is a petition pending in the Supreme Court, filed about 4 or 5 years ago, again at the instance of Swami Dayanand Saraswati and the Acharya Dharma Sabha, which challenges the Tamil Nadu, the Andhra, Telangana, and the Puducherry religious establishment laws. And a good deal of people who have spent a lot of time in understanding how these legislations work have brought to earth for that the amount of corruption involved, the amount of misappropriation involved, the degree of breach of trust involved in the hands of government is of far more, higher degree and order than what could probably happen in the hands of private trustees and private individuals. Therefore, where is the answer? The answer is in the Constitution, or the answer is on a better understanding of the Constitution, far removed from what we have understood it so far. So these are challenges, and I think we need to have a lot of more deeper understanding, communications, sharing, and generation of the what I would like to call the deeper abilities of every human mind, those fundamental layers where the holy elements and of our minds lie. Let us try to look at each one of them. We are all capable of all that. I think we are slowly giving it up only because the way we practice religion has also become very shallow and superficial. The way we practice religion has also become very materialistic. While on the one hand, while we are faced with all kinds of challenges in individual life, whether I will get an employment, whether I will pass my examinations, whether I will get a good life, whether I will get good promotions in my career, whether I will be able to live a healthy, physically healthy life. We encounter all kinds of challenges in life. And we thought that religion or anything associated with religion can probably give us answers. A deep faith in prayer is always said to be an abiding part of religion to handle these challenges. But where it may be so, there are other aspects of religion as well. Therefore, if in contemporary times our practice of religion is also seriously questionable, I think we are ourselves responsible for this melee. If we are responsible for this melee, we have to give answers. We have to discover answers. Answers, I think, may not be far away from our discovery. And probably I would like to end at this. If there are any questions, I may take them. I don't know how long I've taken.
1 hour 45 minutes.
Roughly more than an hour and a half. I'm sorry if I have gone beyond my limited time. So let me conclude today's discussions on this note. Thank you for the organizers once again for this wonderful opportunity for me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And the flow of your lecture was such that nobody care about the time. But importance of the subject and the topic you chosen, and fantastically, sir, you delivered, and a lot of material in a short time. I request we have just in between joined Dr. Gaurav Kaushik from Magra University to give his comments or add something or ask any question. Dr. Gaurav Kaushik is professor in Agra University. Now it is known as Dr. V.R. Ambedkar University.
I see. Is he coming online?
Yes, yes. Dr. Gaurav, you can unmute yourself.
Good evening to all.
Yes.
Sir, I have recently joined, so I have not heard.
Please start your video.
Oh, I see.
Yes.
Good evening.
Yes, yes. Sir has spoken on law and religion and has given a wonderful lecture, and we have recorded it. And later we have to circulate it in all the faculties, in your faculty also. This lecture is a wonderful lecture, giving how the law is controlling religion and how the diversity is important, and how the this constitution and law is required, and how nothing. I think a golden rule. It appears from the lecture of Honorable Sri R. Venkataramaniji that there is no golden rule. It appears this is a golden rule. So what do you ask about? Is there a requirement of law to control the religious institutions, or is it a what euro? You ask to something. I think, sir, Dr. Gaurav could not join in time, so he has left with. I request R.P. Singh ji or Verma ji to ask.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Mr. Jitendra ji, we are very, very happy to listen this lecture, and we appreciate it. Your effort was too much appreciable. We are too much happy to listen the lecture. No question again arise about this matter, because we are not well known as much as the Honorable Advocate has spoken in his lecture. So thank you. I am very happy, and we all are happy. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Shalenji, would you like to ask any question?
Being a student of law, I was listening very carefully to my very distinguished speaker of today's session, Honorable Advocate Shri Venkataramaniji. He has dealt all the important issues. He discussed about the nature of religion, the problems relating to religion. He highlighted, in fact, the basic philosophy of our tradition, that is Ekam Sad Viprah Bahudha Vadanti. If there is one problem relating to religion, this is what Sri Venkataramaniji has spoken about the feeling of superiority. And that's why he has rightly pointed out the main crux of the problem which about the religion which we practice. My only question to Honorable Sir is that, sir, being a student of law, I foresee that in next few years, there is going to be a very crucial debate in Indian polity, and that is relating to common civil. Sir, as you are aware that this goal of common civil code is a constitutional goal, and Supreme Court has in many cases has observed the importance of the common civil code. Sometimes the Supreme Court has given some directions to the state and asked the question, what so far you have done. So I think that this is a very sensitive issue in a country like India, which is multi-religious society, and where the common civil code has been seen by many followers in the sense of suspicion. So being a senior advocate of the Supreme Court, how do you perceive this problem, and what will be your suggestion to the policy makers? Because on the one hand, there has been a demand of gender equality and right to liberty of individual under Article 21. So on the basis of Article 21, there has been a demand for the Common Civil Code. On the other hand, this demand for this Common Civil Code has been seen as an intrusion, as an attempt to introduce, to attack or to regulate the right to faith. So how do you resolve all these two competing issues, and what will be your suggestion to the policy makers? How should government proceed? How should parliament proceed so that the common civil code, this constitutional goal, should be achieved in gradual manner without putting any controversy?
This is a very involved question. I would like to certainly answer it, but I only want to say that there are no textbook answers to this question. And why did the Constitution want to even talk about it? Is it because the Constitution makers thought that A, B, C faiths, aspects relating to marriage, inheritance, succession, etc., should be on the same footing for all faiths? Or did the Constitution makers think that there are some faiths where, let's say, women were not seen as receiving equal treatment in all these matters? So if you look at why religions ever at all dealt with these aspects, at any given point of time in history, it would have become necessary for either a religious congregation or the head of a founder of a religion or people over a period of time to deal with these matters. And whatever has been found to be in order, let's say 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, or when the Holy Quran was written, or when Bible, the New Testament was written, whatever period of time, if it was thought important to deal with all those matters and bring it within the practice of religion, the reason probably was you are trying to elevate these aspects to a certain level, and the abiding nature of these injunctions becomes very clear. So if there is no abiding nature or a command aspect in any of these things, then why would people follow them? So therefore, in order to bring in a command element or an abiding element to follow these aspects, I think religions began to talk about them and have become part of our religious faith or practice. Otherwise, if religion is defined as that domain where we are only concerned about our understanding of the world, the universe, my relationship with the Creator, all these things have no relationship whatsoever to those issues at all. But it's only because, for practical reasons, I think the foundations of every religion began to bring it as part of religion. But the moment it becomes evident to us that religion need not deal with them at all, and internally within every religion, the debate comes that why should, regardless of the holy dimensions of these aspects in our religion, regardless of the scriptural basis for these matters, marriage, succession, etc., regardless of the scriptural basis, it is no longer necessary for us to deal with them and keep them within the scriptural basis, then I think there's no problem about it. But I don't think it's going to happen so easily. Therefore, the constitution makers probably thought that given this very complex dimension, and if women must be given a pride of place, of equality, how do you go about it? Therefore, the commonness aspect of what is called the common civil code is only this element as I understand. And it's not because one faith is comparable to other faith and therefore, why you're doing only for Hindu religion and why not do it for the Islamic religion, etc. I think they are very sterile debates. If women and children following any faith whatsoever, as human beings, deserve the same equality of treatment. And after all, today, we don't live in a socio-economic structure which is comparable to a feudal structure. We're no longer a huntsman. We're no longer a merely agricultural community. The way we organize our economic affairs, the way we are organizing our economic activities, the way we will continue in future, organize every aspect of our life, they're going to be very, very different from what they were when the scriptures began to talk about the importance of marriage or inheritance of property, etc., as part of the scriptures. So once the reason and relevance of being retained in the scriptures is lost, I think it must be dealt on a very rational basis. If it is understood that way, then I think many of us who are demanding a common civil code with a political reason or a motivation, I think that will become irrelevant. So it is becoming suspect because one faith says, who are you to ask for common civil code? The other faith says, on the one hand, our faith is exposed to challenges about reforms. And I think every faith must be so exposed. I think that is a very fundamentally called hostile way of going about it. That's a path for disaster. We must avoid it. But in principle, I think if equal treatment of women and children are important, and such equal treatment will necessarily arise because of the way our social affairs will be organized, then I think the so-called common civil code will receive an entirely different understanding. It will no longer be a matter between a clash between one faith and another faith. And I think it ought not to be so. I think we must also, if possible, avoid the bringing in religious or other faith colors to these aspects. If the constitution makers really thought that there's going to be a clash of faiths, they'd never put it in the constitution. And that's where I think it should end.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. So we call it a day.
Sir, because of the paucity of time, I would not ask someone others to ask you more questions because I think you have already covered. Yes, sir.
You can always record your questions and send them to me, no problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It is your greatness, sir, that you have given a time for today's lecture and enriched us with the knowledge about law and religion. And this is a very good subject chosen by you, giving us the entire in-depth knowledge about the subject and about the topic as well. Sir, we cannot give you the proper words.
No, it's okay. No, it's all right.
For thanks. But certainly, we acknowledge your greatness and your contribution in our little efforts which we are making.
Please do.
Yes, sir.
Please do.
Sir, it is with the hope and with the thinking that in pre-independence era, advocates not only given their professional services, but everything they gave for the freedom fighters, for their shelters, for their livelihood, everything they had given, like Chittaranjan Das and Lokmanya Tilak, Mahatma Gandhi, and Malviji. Sir, these great persons who were the lawyers of a great standard at that time, they have given a lot of their lifetime in the making of nation. So we request you, sir, that you give on the coming times in the future, and the recent future is we can see 2nd October, Mahatma Gandhi's birthday is coming. So likewise, if you are not available on that occasion, we can invite you on another occasion, that is Constitution Day or before that. Sir, kindly, it is our humble request that people like you can inspire the confidence in the common advocates, particularly the beginners and youth of the country, that they can have values in their life and legal values and morality as well. So with these words, I would not also take more time, and I thank you, sir, by heart. And I request CL Verma ji to give a vote of thanks, and it is
that
our.
Yes. That may not be necessary. You have said more than a vote of thanks.
Sir, vote of thanks is required in the sense before starting we chant Gayatri Mantra. That is the meaning of Gayatri Mantra is to lead our life in a righteous direction, and we conclude our every program with the Shanti Path.
Okay.
So in that sense, I request CL Verma ji to chant Shanti Path.
Please unmute him.
Yes, please unmute yourself.
Hello.
Yes, you are audible.
ऑनरेबल डिस्टिंग्विश्ड स्पीकर महोदय को मैं प्रणाम करता हूं। सिंस समापन शांति मंच से होता है, तो ये संस्कृत का शब्द है, आई कैन नॉट स्पीक इन इंग्लिश। सो जिनको ये आता है उनसे अनुरोध है कि एक स्वर एक निष्ठा मेरे साथ रहें। और जो ऑनरेबल डिस्टिंग्विश्ड स्पीकर महोदय ने एक अवसर दिया है क्वेश्चन पूछने का, तो एक प्रश्न मैं भी शूट अप करना चाहूंगा थ्रू ऑनरेबल होस्ट। नाउ लेट अस स्टार्ट फॉर। ओम द्यो शांति अंतरिक्ष गम शांति पृथ्वी शांतिरापः शांतिरौषधयः शांतिर्विश्वे देवा शांति ब्रह्म शांति शांतिरेव कामा शांतिरेधि। ओम शांति 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 सर्वारिष्ट शांतिर्भवतु।
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay. I take leave.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you.
Thank
जितेंद्र जी, हेलो जितेंद्र जी, am I audible to you?
Yes, you are audible.
What I
आप लोगों के साथ में जुड़ करके, तो सबके प्रति मैं संवेद रूप से अपना आभार व्यक्त करता हूं, और विशेष रूप से ऑर्गेनाइजिंग कमेटी और जितेंद्र सिंह जी, उनके सत प्रयासों की मैं बहुत ईश्वर से प्रार्थना करूंगा कि उनके ये प्रयास जो है भविष्य में और भी सफल हों। सबको मेरा प्रणाम।
डॉक्टर शैलेंद्र जी।
जी भाई साहब।
हाँ जी, मैं हरप्रीत सिंह एडवोकेट बोल रहा हूँ फ्रॉम बनारस। मैं ये कह रहा था।
जी भाई साहब, आपका वीडियो नहीं आ रहा है, अपना वीडियो ऑन कीजिए।
अच्छा।